Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. Go ahead and grab a seat, maybe turn down the lights a bit, and let's just imagine we're sitting around a flickering campfire. Today, we're diving deep into the tragic and frankly chilling history behind Goa's infamous DeMello house. It's one of those places where the past absolutely stubbornly refuses to stay buried. So let's get right into it.
So picture this. Would you enter Goa's most haunted house completely alone at midnight? Try to put yourself in the shoes of a 19-year-old on vacation. You're feeling invincible, you're hanging out with friends, and honestly, it just sounds like a thrilling, harmless dare, right? Well, as we're about to see, the line between a fun little dare and an absolute living nightmare is terrifyingly thin.
Chapter 1. The Midnight Challenge. A bonfire dare gone wrong. All right, let's rewind about 3 years. A 19-year-old guy named Samarth was on a trip to Goa. He and his friends were chilling by a bonfire on the beach late at night, swapping horror stories. You know the vibe. And naturally, the atmosphere was just ripe for a dare. The challenge? Go alone to DeMello's house, which is widely considered to be Goa's absolute most haunted location, and snap a photo inside. So, armed with literally nothing but a scooter and a fully charged phone, Samarth headed into the dark. He just kind of laughed it off, right? He accepted the challenge and rode out, having absolutely no clue that he was driving straight into a deadly trap where a historic tragedy was basically just waiting for him. Chapter 2. The Tragic DeMello History. The Lore of the Two Brothers. Now, to really understand what Samarth was walking into, we have to talk about the tragic history behind DeMello House itself. Decades ago, this place was home to two brothers, and over the years, a deeply escalating hatred grew between them. We're not just talking about normal sibling rivalry here. It was pure, unending venom. Then one fateful midnight, this endless feud spiraled completely out of control and ended in a brutal, violent stabbing. The aftermath was incredibly grisly. The murderous brother literally dragged his bleeding sibling out back and buried him in the dirt right under a tree. Years later, the surviving brother died under highly mysterious circumstances. The deep tragedy of their violent feud never truly ended, and it left their hostile, rage-filled spirits trapped forever within those walls. This sorrow, this unending anger, that's the heavy, cursed baggage of the property Samarth was riding towards. Chapter 3. Entering the Cursed House, a Portuguese ruin frozen in time. As Samarth finally pulled up to the property on his scooter, the entire atmosphere just shifted. The wind turned freezing cold, and this dead, heavy silence fell over the surrounding jungle. And then he saw it. DeMello House. It was this ruined, old Portuguese structure that looked less like an abandoned building and way more like a den for dark entities. Outside, there was this leaning tree with deep scratches all over the trunk, looking exactly as if someone had desperately clawed at it with their bare fingernails. Remember the murdered brother buried under the tree from the lore? Yeah, the tragedy was literally etched right into the wood. The tree's roots were violently bursting through the stone walls, like the house itself had swallowed up their lives. And inside, the hall walls were covered in these weird, distorted cartoon faces, but the crazy part is, their eyes were just these empty black spots, and Samarth felt like every single one of those black voids was staring directly at him. So as he actually steps through the gate, the physical toll of the house hits him immediately. First, the temperature just plummets, freezing cold. Then a sudden crushing heaviness sits right on his chest. It became an absolute struggle just to take a breath. And finally, this overwhelming, vile stench of rotting flesh filled the air. It smelled like a dead animal. Actually, scratch that, it was worse. It smelled exactly like a human tragedy decaying right inside the hall. The dread wasn't just in his head anymore, you guys. It was a physical force assaulting his senses, completely fueled by the lingering wrath of those tragic brothers. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Dead. The Entities Manifest. Okay, this is where the story gets incredibly tense. Samarth pulls out his phone and opens up the selfie camera, just trying to get the proof for the dare. To his naked eye, reality was just an empty, dark, endless corridor trailing off into the blackness. But through the digital lens of his selfie camera, on the screen, he clearly saw two shadowy figures standing directly behind him. Boom, he spins around in a total panic, but there's absolutely no one there. The ghosts of the two brothers were only visible through the screen, their tragic bond somehow forcing them to wander together in that digital noise. And right then, that heavy silence breaks. A loud growl echoes out from the dark, followed by a terrible scream, and instantly followed by a painful shriek. Suddenly, the voices of two men erupt around him, aggressively shouting and fighting. The historical feud, the exact tragedy that cursed this land, was literally playing out right into Samarth's ears. His blood ran absolutely cold. He just wanted to snap a picture and run away as fast as possible. But right at that very second, his fully charged phone inexplicably goes completely dead. Chapter 5. The Horrifying Climax. Trapped by the Past. At this point, Samarth bolts for the exit. He is desperate to escape into the night. But as he reaches that large, scratched tree near the doorway, his feet just freeze. It felt like something unseen beneath the soil had clamped onto his legs. So he looks down, and right at his feet is a grave-sized pit. Inside it lays a rotting, half-buried corpse, just severely decayed. But when Samarth looked closer, his mind completely rejected what he was seeing. Because the face on that rotting corpse, it was his own face. His breathing just stopped. It was this intense psychological horror that defied all reality, like the house was projecting the brother's doom directly onto him. While he is paralyzed by this impossible sight, the growling comes back. He turns around and sees two men fighting. Their backs are to him, but their bodies are entirely rotted, covered in deep, bleeding stab wounds. The two brothers. Slowly, their necks snap backward 180 degrees to face him. Their heads were broken, and their eyes were glowing this furious, angry red, harboring decades of unending wrath. As they advance on him from the dark, that corpse in the dirt springs to life and grabs Samarth, violently pulling him underground. Samarth is screaming, kicking with all his might, but the earth is just swallowing him, right into the very grave where the entire tragedy began. As the dirt fills his lungs and he starts suffocating, his vision completely fades to black. Chapter 6. The Traumatic Aftermath. Escaping DeMello House. So, when Samarth didn't return to the beach for several hours, his friends obviously grew incredibly anxious and went looking for him. By 5:30 in the morning, with the sun just starting to rise and cut through the darkness of the jungle, they finally made it to DeMello House. And there, lying outside the house, completely covered in dirt, was Samarth. He was unconscious, but thankfully, he was still breathing. They pulled him up, gave him some water, and he eventually regained consciousness. I mean, he could hardly believe he was still alive. He frantically starts recounting this entire horrific ordeal to his friends, the rotting bodies, the selfie camera shadows, the open grave. But you guessed it, they didn't believe him. They just totally dismissed it as a massive hallucination brought on by fear and the power of suggestion. But as they were leaving the property, Samarth turned his head. Looking back, he clearly saw those exact two brothers, standing side by side right in the window of DeMello House, staring directly at him. For Samarth, that was the final, undeniable proof that the tragic history was entirely real. He packed his bags and left Goa that very same day, just forever scarred by what he experienced. And that brings us to the end of today's explainer. So what do you think? Do you believe DeMello House is truly haunted by the tragic, endless feud of these two brothers? Or is the human mind, especially when it's fueled by local lore and a really spooky environment, just incredibly capable of conjuring up terrifying tricks? It's a deeply unsettling question for sure. Thank you so much for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the past doesn't actually stay in the past. Stay curious, and I'll catch you guys next time.